think there are a few very urgent issues. Number one is that people know what they are responsible for. So bishops, provincials, or other church leaders, also lay leaders in the church, need to know what they have to do according to canon law and according to the civil norms and legislation in the country and in the state in which one lives. This is number one. I need to be aware of what is asked in my job, in my position, in my role. The second issue that we have to confront is accountability. So to whom am I accountable if I am in this role? Is there a process that is objectified, where you have criteria, what you need to do, when you need to do that, and the way how you implement what is asked of you and in your role. And this is important for the bishops, as we have seen also in the discussion at the meeting of the presidents of the bishops' conferences in February. This was one key issue, and we have seen a somehow very fast reply on that need by the Holy See, because the Pope has issued a new law that is effective from 1st of June 2019, in which this investigation into cover-up and negligence is delegated to a mid-level responsibility. So bishops are now accountable first to the Archbishop and then to the Holy See and then to the Pope himself, and not directly to the Pope. And where the Archbishop is accused of negligence or cover-up, then it is one of the bishops around that archdiocese, plus the nuncio, the papal ambassador, who conduct a preliminary investigation, and then it goes further to the Holy See. So accountability on all levels, and with criteria that we know about, that are defined, and that are also to some extent at the standard, also compared to other institutions. That is very much necessary. Yeah, there are risks, of course, that people would not ask where it is possible for independent inquiry, investigation. Yet in the Catholic Church, we have local churches, and these are probably up to 80% of all countries in Africa and Asia, and in other parts of the world, where there is no functional legal system, where there is high corruption among police, and where you don't have the personnel, the resources, the competent persons among laity to conduct such an investigation. This is the fact. I have seen that, and I have heard about many countries where you don't have the resources that you would have in Australia, in Germany, or in the United States, among lay people and independent commissioners or independent investigators. It's simply not there. And then you need to rely on the people you have. It should be organized as independent as possible, but as I say, in many parts of the world, this cannot be simply delegated to somebody outside the church, because it's very difficult to find people. I can give also one example. I mean, in one of the African countries that I visited over the last years, a religious sister told me that they had reported the abuse of a niece by her own uncle, not a priest, a lay person, in this village. And the police went to take him, and they put him in prison for 2 days until he had paid enough to get out of it. What did he do? He returned to the village, and you can imagine what the life of this niece was. So, no, the situations are much more complex if you look into the whole world. I think a key element in this is when and insofar an organization or an institution find a way so that the protection, the safeguarding of minors of age and other vulnerable people is something that comes natural to any consideration, to any kind of planning, to any kind of restructuring, positions, roles, rooms, space, also in the literal sense of the word. So that it comes as something that is part and parcel of the whole being and the whole remit of this organization, not something that is added on. And this is not done simply by law. This is not possible just to change things by a new norm. It is necessary that this is accompanied, the change of norm, the change of structure, the redefinition of roles, etc., is accompanied really by some kind of change of heart, change of attitude. And I have come to see that it is necessary to have special workshops on safeguarding, to have safeguarding officers. Of course this is needed, but our aim should be that at a certain point this becomes a sort of need for everybody involved in this organization and school and parish and diocese and religious province or whatever it is, so that everybody feels him or herself involved and co-responsible for the safety of all of these people who come to meet, to work, or to be in that space. That would be for me the ideal, that it is not only left to the specialists, it becomes some kind of common mission. Yeah, how do you build trust? When you see that people act according to what they say, and in regard to the church, that we behave what we preach. We act as consistent, we live out as consistent as possible our mission, and in correspondence with the gospel itself. So this is how you build trust. This is at all levels. With regard to the situation in which we find ourselves in Australia, in other parts of the church, not in all, but in a good number of countries by now, where people are losing their trust and confidence in the church leadership, I think there is one way that is something that all of us have to take at heart. That is, we don't pretend to be somebody else or something else than what we are, that we are humble enough to accept that we have our faults, and we don't pretend to be perfect, and we don't impose on other people something that we ourselves don't live. This doesn't go anymore. I think I've read on Twitter recently that somebody said, please, bishops, stop talking about certain topics, listen for a year, just earn the trust again, that you listen to what is really going on and don't pretend to tell us what we have to do. First, since you don't know where we are and what are our concerns, and secondly, because in your courtyard you have a lot to clean up. Yeah, and you see, there are three aspects of the ministry of any clergy. That is the testimony, that is the liturgy, and that is the teaching. And unfortunately, testimony, so witnessing, martyria, to be a martyr, and the liturgy are less important for the public presentation and the public input that the church gives. I mean, the church leadership as a whole seems to give, at least is perceived as giving, is much more important, the teaching, than the first two. And this is something that has come to an unbalance that is certainly unhealthy, because we celebrate liturgy and we try to live out what the gospel asks us to do, but what we have concentrated or come to concentrate on is mostly on that teaching level. And that doesn't take into account the whole experiential field and the contact to the world of normal people, where they are, what they are living through, what they are concerned with, and that needs to go in the direction of the teaching, and the teaching needs to listen to that also. Otherwise, it becomes totally disconnected. Yeah, clericalism is certainly a way to present oneself as within that role, within that position, or with this ministry, and therefore I am entitled to receive respect. Therefore I'm entitled that you follow my command, you have to obey me, or you can't question me because I'm a priest or because I'm a bishop. This is part of the definition of and expression of clericalism. But I learned here last year that there is also clericalism in laity, not only confined to clergy. When you cling to your prestige, to your desk, to your kind of the attention you get, that people, as I say, cannot criticize you. This is also some kind of clericalism that is not confined to clerics only, and that is part of an ongoing educational effort, that you know that you have to learn continuously something, that you are never finished, and that be you a priest or be you in a position as a layperson, you still have to grow, and you have to listen to others, and you have to take in what the competence of others is and how they see you. Then only you can change and grow in a way that shows that you are serious about your commitment, and you don't pretend to be somebody else than you are. Yeah, Australia, US, Canada, Ireland, or Germany now, those countries that have gone through a public scandal and a public crisis have a lot to offer to countries in the developing world. We have professional standards, we have definition of safeguarding policies, we have guidelines, we have formation programs, and so forth. What is equally necessary is that we also learn about the situation in those countries. I am not advocating a one-size-fits-all approach. I mean, this is the experience that many have had also in other areas, not only in safeguarding, also in economic development or the education. When you come with a Western or an Anglo-Saxon model to an African country, they may even accept it because you provide for it, you pay for it, and you think now you bring the salvation and the solution to this country. And they may follow this as long as you are there and as long as you pay. And after 3 years, they will just, when you finish your job, you go home and you think you have implemented that, and it may not be the case, because they just forget about it, because it has not entered into the language, into the cultural images, into the symbols, into the type of relationships that are culturally defined in that context, in that tribe, in that caste, or in such circumstances. So we have a lot to offer, but we can't pretend that everywhere people follow our path. So it is, I believe, it could be a very fruitful exchange and a dialogue, because we also need to learn something, because we have, even in Australia, we have lots of non-Anglos here now. So how do they talk about sexuality, misbehavior in sexuality? How do they trust people? How do you express closeness, distance to others? This is very different from culture to culture. This doesn't say that there are no common standards. Rape is rape in every culture. But how in a certain tribal environment abuse is dealt with, how there are mechanisms to cope with it, to reconcile within a village people who have misbehaved, this is completely different to our standards, where the legal system immediately comes in. There are other mechanisms, and you need to learn about that. You need to understand how far this can go and how far this can really help the people in this situation. We need to offer something, and the local churches can learn a lot. They don't need to reinvent the wheel when it comes to writing safeguarding guidelines and so forth. But that doesn't leave them from the necessity to really find their own way of expressing it. Otherwise, it may be quite superficial, and after a few months or years, it will be shelved and it will be forgotten. It is a huge cultural issue. For example, when we prepared the meeting of the presidents of the bishops' conferences in February, I was tasked to find and to invite survivors from different parts of the world, because purposely we wanted to have people there who could speak to the bishops from all countries in different languages, with different skin colors, and in a different way, expressing what the hurt is that they have gone through because of abuse by clergy in all parts of the world, on all continents. And it was very difficult to find people from Africa, from Asia, and from Eastern Europe who would be willing to show their face. Some of them agreed to have an audio recorded interview, and that was displayed also for the bishops, but they refused to have their face shown. They didn't want to know their names by others. So it is, in some parts of the world, it is still a great taboo in society, not in church alone. And that's why we are now really helping also that to set up so-called survivor advisory panels in some parts of the world where survivors have not come forward publicly and feel very much ashamed, and it is very difficult to speak out publicly. For example, in most parts of Africa and Asia, also in some countries of Latin America, and also in some parts of Europe, Southern and Eastern Europe, it is not, let me say, common that survivors speak in television or they disclose it publicly. Yeah? That doesn't mean that bishops in those countries are not aware of the scale of the problem and the urgency of it. Because I believe that a good number, more than we know, a good number of bishops meet survivors and they encounter them. Sometimes survivors ask them to keep quiet about the meeting, even to their own family, even to their partners. They don't disclose that because they are so ashamed, or they don't want to hurt others. Their parents, they shouldn't know. But as long as you haven't listened to a survivor, you don't understand the scale, the impact of the harm in one person's life, which may be harmed forever. And only when you realize the depth of this hurt, then you are also motivated to take it on, not only as some obligation, but as a matter of heart. Mm-hmm. And I think that in the meeting in February, if you look at the 115 presidents of bishops' conferences who were there, and the superior generals and the heads of the Oriental, the Eastern churches, Eastern Rite churches, I think there was a huge shift in that awareness. There was much growth in the sensitivity of, oh, now I understand how deep it is and how hurtful it is, and now I want to act. And we have seen that in many parts of the world this has had an effect after February, because bishops' conferences now say that they are updating their guidelines, they invite victims, they cooperate with civil authorities, and so forth. But this comes about when you really sit with victims and listen with your whole presence there. It shouldn't remain only on the listening level, that is the start. But if it remains at the listening level, the danger is that okay, now we have listened and we have understood. No, there needs to be an impetus, an impulse to go on with this. What do I do with this now? Because I can also be very much paralyzed by what the survivor says, because this is so huge, this is so devastating, and it's, for many, it is paralyzing. But you need to go a step further, work with that, pray with that, discuss with that, share with others. What is the impact and what are the consequences for us, for me personally, for my immediate environment, and for the whole structure, church, parish, diocese,